In this video, we're going to be changing the brakes on this 2011 Honda CRV, and we're going to be doing the front brakes. So these rotors actually look like they're in really good shape. I don't feel any grooving on here, same with the back side, that feels really smooth. So these are definitely in good enough shape. We don't need to replace these, but the pads definitely need to be replaced. They're definitely low. Way easier to get these caliper bolts off. You want to turn the wheel so the caliper bolts are more exposed and you can fit larger wrenches in. So now that gives us much more room to get a breaker bar in here or even get an impact hammer in here. So it's definitely important to turn the wheels. It just makes it a world easier. Since we're not going to be changing the rotor, we don't need to take the caliper bolts off. We can just take the guide pin bolts off right here. I'm going to go ahead and spray some PB Blaster on them just to get it easier to take off. And then we won't have to take the caliper bolts off. These are easier to take off. And then we can take this off. And then it'll be easier to change the brake pads as well. Now we can go ahead and break these bolts loose. There we go. That one came off pretty easy. And then we'll also break loose the one that's down here. These bolts are on here really loose, or I mean, they weren't on here loose, but these threads are really clean. So these came out by hand. You can actually see how clean these are. That's a good sign. And now we can go ahead and try to pry this out, and we're probably gonna need a screwdriver. So now we're gonna just take the screwdriver and start to pry this out. And you just wanna be careful of this brake line hose up here. We're of course not going to crimp that because there's two layers in the rubber, and when that crimps, there could be a leak starting from the inside. And you never hang this by that hose. You always take a wire or something like that and hook it up here and hold this where the wire or the hose here is not under stress. So now I'm going to go ahead and pry off one of these old brake pads. Seems a little tight. You should definitely be gliding off. So now with this brake pad out, I was struggling to get it out. It was definitely near the end, and right as it got near the end, it was hard to get out. And whenever I took it out, I could see it was this piece here. This is a spring that's holding that in, but that just made it harder to get it out. And these brakes were definitely squeaking, but it doesn't look like it's quite there at the squealer bar. Now this definitely is a low brake pad. These definitely need to be changed, but I don't think our squeaking was the squealer bar. Now we'll go ahead and pull out the other brake pad here. And you can see right here, this is what was happening. They have that little circle right there at the end of the spring, and that's what was giving me the problem trying to take this out. So if you just hit it at the right angle, then they basically just fall out. And this one definitely is low as well. This needs to be replaced. Now one thing that people often forget to do is clean these guide pins. Right now I can see these are moving nice and smooth, but if these ever seize up or just get crunchy, your brakes will seize up and they'll wear a lot faster. They'll wear unevenly. So this is an important step to take these out and clean them and make sure they're gliding as smooth as they can. Sometimes there's an upper and a lower guide pin. You can see that's the same here. This one here goes on the top. It has that little rubber piece here, and then this one goes on the bottom and it doesn't have that rubber piece. Just make sure you keep these. You know which one goes on which. Guide pins are already pretty clean, but I'm gonna just buff these up on the buffing wheel. Now if you don't have a buffing wheel, we've used just high grit sandpaper like 1200 grit, 800 grit, and clean these, and that's worked, and it definitely does a good job of getting these smooth. But since we have the buffing wheel, we're just gonna do this and it'll go much faster. So you can see this is the one that I polished, and this is the one that I haven't polished yet, and there's a big difference between these two. These are definitely shinier than they are from the factory. The grease that we're gonna put these in with, we're gonna use silicone grease. Because this is rubber, we don't want any other kind of grease to deteriorate the rubber, and we know silicone grease is safe with plastic parts because it's not petroleum based. So just put a bit of grease on the guide pins here, smear it around a bit, and then put that in, and just work the grease in. And I can tell that is moving smoother, much smoother than it was before. And actually, I forgot that the rubber piece goes on the top. This guide pin here goes on the bottom. Don't mix that up. So put the top one in, just make the grease around, and put it in. The one with the rubber goes on the top. And this one also glides much smoother. I mean, look at that. That's definitely much better than what they were before. So fitting in the brake pads here, I can feel that this top side here fits in smoothly, but the bottom side, whenever I try to fit that in, it just doesn't want to go in, and that just the bottom side is tight. See, I can just barely get that to slide in there. So we just need to grind this away just a little bit. We're going to use this bench grinder just to take a little bit off these edges so it'll slide in easier. So I was trying to fit this brake pad in, and I have the correct distances here now. I just need to take a little bit off the ends here because it's a little bit too tall. So now with our adjustments made, let's try to put this in and see if it fits. Now, there we go. That's what we want it to feel like. Now let's see. It may be a little tight. I want it to be able to glide back and forth because you want your brakes to be able to push in and come back out. And if they don't come back out, then your brakes are gonna wear much, much faster. And these they seem a little tight, so what I'm gonna do is just grind a little bit off those edges and maybe a little bit off the top, and then we'll put some grease on this so they slide really smooth. It seems to be fitting well, so we're just going to take some high temperature grease and just put it on the edges here just so this is gonna slide nice and smooth because that's important. And just try not to get any on the brake pad itself just because you don't want your brake pads lubricated. Sometimes these wheels are so stuck on here, you just need to front snap kick them off. The grease on these brake pads here, we're just gonna go ahead and slide them right into place. That's how you want your brake pads to slide in and just glide in there nice and smooth, and they should be able to glide back and forth smooth. Just take the extra time and get it to this step because it's definitely worth it. I'm just trying to put in this pad right here, and as I go to put it in, it fits right in. I've only had this happen a few times. I haven't even started to grind this. Like, there's no grind marks anywhere. This is just from the factory, and it just slides right in. This is just what you always want to happen, but never happens. But this is definitely gonna save us some time. That is great. We're gonna just take some grease here, high temperature grease, and put it on these tabs here, just to get that gliding even smoother. So now let's go ahead and slide these into place. And oh, I mean, that is so great. That makes it so much easier, so much faster. Yeah, that's nice. So here's our piston retractor tool. And what we're going to do is just make sure you always do this and put grease on these threads. We've had this tool for a lot of years, and that's just because we've always put grease on the threads. Because when there's anything like gear pullers, piston retractor tools like this, when there's that much pressure on the threads, they need to be able to glide smoothly or else they'll just grind up and you'll ruin the tool. We have the dual pistons here. This can be a little bit tricky to retract. What we're just gonna do is take one of the old brake pads, put it on one of the cylinders, and then we can take the retractor tool and just start to push down on this. And this, of course, should just be sliding very smoothly. It shouldn't be crunchy at all. This is definitely feeling nice and smooth. This is what we want it to feel like. So now we have this bottomed out as far as we can go. So let's go ahead and take this tool out and go ahead and move over to the other side. Now we'll go ahead and take down the second piston. And also just make sure these pistons are going down nice and level. They don't want to be going down cockeyed. Push this one down. This one came up just a little bit. So I'm just going to crank this one down as well just to get these even. Now that we have both of the pistons retracted, we can go ahead and take the wire off that's holding the caliper up. Just like that. And slide it over the old brake pads. And make sure you take that wire out you don't want to leave it on the spring. So we'll just push those guide pins in and slide that right into place. There we go. And now we're going to anti-seize these guide pin bolts as well, so that these will go in nice and smooth, or come out nice and smooth next time. This always is a good idea just to make the next job whenever you do the brakes much easier. So now we're just gonna go ahead and snug these bolts up here, guide pin bolts. So while you're in here and you have the wheel off, it's a good idea to put some of this Extend Rust Neutralizer. What this does is it chemically changes the rust into neutral, where it won't continue to rust. So we're just gonna dab this on all the brake parts, and this is a preventative step for maintenance, so we won't have these rusting out later and just being a big problem. And we'll do the same thing to the other side. The wheel's just snugged on with the breaker bar. We're gonna go ahead and lower it, and then we can torque the wheels. So now I'm going to take the torque wrench right up to 80 foot-pounds, and since these are steel wheels, we're going to torque it to 80. So in the star pattern, of course, we're always going to torque these to 80 foot-pounds. Now we're just going to seat the brakes in and make sure they're bedded in and ready to drive. That's how you change the front brakes on this 2011 Honda CRV. So I hope you guys found this video useful. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you next time.